everyone.
Hey.
Hi again. How are you?
Hi.
So I am so excited to be with Justin tonight because I was actually at TED Women's when Justin gave an incredible TED Talk about masculinity. And I was sitting in the audience with my co-producer on this project that we're working on now that we're men. And we were listening to Justin and we were like, holy, can I swear?
Yeah.
We were like, holy shit. Like, he is talking about every single thing that this play touches on that we need to be talking about, because Justin and I were just talking about this, but, you know, toxic masculinity is something that I think, and I think Justin would agree with me, is at sort of the root of a lot of the issues that we have in society today.
Most of them.
So I guess, you know, one of the things that Rachel didn't mention when she was talking about Wayfarer is a digital series that Wayfarer is creating called Man Enough. And it's so awesome. It's this dinner series conversation. Basically, it's episodic, and each episode deals with a different issue that's sort of adjacent to or seen through the lens of masculinity. So also, a little known fact that I learned recently, Justin basically risked his company and self-financed and self-distributed this series because after 3 years of shopping it around in Hollywood, which is like a very welcoming community for these kinds of topics, basically blanket rejected.
We don't have any masculinity issues in Hollywood. What are you talking about?
He felt so strongly about actually getting this out there and having it heard by people that he, you know, was willing to risk everything. So I just wanted to talk about sort of where that came from, that sort of passion, and, you know, why? You know, what drove you? Where were you when you were sort of mentally thinking about that?
That's a good question. None of this was planned, honestly. I was a really skinny kid growing up. I was bullied. I think some of my earliest memories were me trying to fit in. And like when I think about my childhood, and I don't know if any of the guys feel this way, and if it's only me, then that's totally fine. But when I think about my childhood, so much of it was me wanting to be accepted by other boys and wanting to be accepted and liked by other boys. And then when I think about the parts of my life that I've been the most ashamed about, it was always me wanting to fit in and be liked by other boys and actions that I took so that I could be accepted. And it took me a good 30 years to realize the kind of the root of my own issues, where they come from and where they came from. And I'm still, trust me, I'm trying to figure it all out. It's a journey, which is why I take these kind of very public jumps and leaps into my own vulnerability. Because my hope is that, you know, if I do it, then maybe other men can have permission to do it as well, because I never had someone doing that growing up. I never had another guy that I watched on TV or followed. There was no one to follow, but I never saw an example of a man that was willing to say, I'm screwed up, here's why. I didn't know what that looked like. My dad is one of the most amazing men, but I watched him pretend like everything was okay my entire life. I thought we were rich my whole life, and then I found out we weren't. I had, you know, I was always like, oh, my parents don't have any problems. Everything's perfect. But in reality, they did. And so that's kind of what this is all about for me, is this awakening and realizing that we all are struggling. And that's what makes us human. And we're living in a day and age where, you know, we're becoming known for our, you know, these fake, these perfections. Like everyone is, you look at Instagram, like everyone's always on vacation. Like, do you work? Do these people have jobs? Everyone's, you know.
People stretch their vacations like 3 weeks of content from like 2 days of vacation.
Everyone's always happy and smiling, and you know. Anyway, so to answer your question, yeah, it was just really important. When I proposed to my wife,
Justin did like the most epic proposal video ever. I feel like every like young woman has seen it ever. It's like 30 minutes of him doing like Superman things, and then like
failing. It's 30 minutes of me sucking at things that should be good. Right.
And it's very adorable.
But when I proposed to my wife, I'm a filmmaker, so I wanted to make her something that was unique, that was for us. And our journey in our personal relationship was me doing all these grand gestures and her continually saying, I don't need that, that's about you, try again. And so our journey of our relationship was me like screaming at the mountain. I'll never forget. I wrote her a spoken word poetry thing, and I'd never written poetry because it was like this. We had like 150 people. It was this huge night, and I did this spoken word poetry, and I laid my heart out there, and everybody applauded, and all the women were like, "Oh, you're amazing!" And my wife was like, I don't want that. That was for you. That wasn't for me." And I learned. So when I proposed to her, I made her this whole video of how, and I was failing at all these things, and it was this whole big joke, and at the end I gave her the proposal she wanted, which was this quiet, intimate moment. And it was my journey addressing my own masculinity. And what happened is that went crazy viral. It got tens of millions of views. It was 27 minutes long. Women loved it, men hated it, as is the story with most of the things I do. But there was a moment that happened that changed me in the way that I looked at it. And I was working out I was in this gym in Hollywood, and this really big, ripped guy came up to me. He's like, "Hey, my girlfriend showed me your proposal last night." And I had no idea what he was gonna say next. And he's like, "Dude, you made me cry." And he was like quiet about it and embarrassed about it, but he fist bumped me, and I went, that's the problem. Yeah. I was like, why do we have to acknowledge it? Like, why is it so much of a thing that, like, we have to secretly come out and say, like, hey, what's wrong with just us crying? What's wrong with just us? Why did your girlfriend have to show it to you? Why can't you search proposal videos? So all that being said, that was where it started, and I realized slowly over the course of once I became an actor again and I started getting in public, men would comment and would be silent and would reach out to me directly, never publicly, about any of these things. They'd reach out for advice, they'd comment on my pictures, they would do things, but they would never do it publicly. I realized that men just don't have permission. So I really believe with all my heart that this was an important time, and I had the feeling once before when I did My Last Days, and I just felt like this can work. People are ready. We're underestimating the potential of boys and men all around the country. It's not just women that want this. I believe men want it. And so I said, if no one else will make it, then we have to, because that's the only way I can sleep at night.
Pretty awesome. And why digitally through this sort of, why video, right? Like this is an expensive way to get this message out.
Thanks for reminding me.
There's cheaper ways to do it, right? Like people are podcasting, writing a book is obviously very hard, but like cheaper in terms of like overhead, right? And upfront costs. Yeah. So why?
I think that, well, look, I really believe in trying to, I'm a storyteller. Let's just be real. I'm a storyteller. I tell stories. Like when I was in high school, instead of book reports, I would make little movies. Like I remade The Great Gatsby with an alternate ending at one point.
Well, what's the ending?
Oh, I don't remember exactly. I just remember there was a pool scene at the end. I don't remember what we did with it, but it was like a surprise. But I'm a storyteller, and I believe that storytelling is the way that we build culture. And culture's been built a certain way, and media has taken us in a very interesting direction. I also believe that media can take us back, and we live in a dark world right now. I mean, it is depressing out there. It's hard. We're in the Institute of Peace at the moment, so this is a beautiful kind of bubble here where we're getting just inspiration so that all of us can go out into the world and be the lights in the darkness. But we live in a pretty dark time, so much so that entertainment companies are catering to try to create more things that are fearful and dark and scary and depressing, or just escapism. So yeah, I just kind of believe that we have an obligation, if we have a platform, to use it for the betterment of mankind and to talk about things that no one will talk about in a way that's digestible and fun and maybe inspiring. So yeah, I'm working on a podcast and I'm working on a book and I'm doing all those things.
Knew it.
But yes, true. But I don't know. I think that we consume media and it's something that's easily shareable. And I think also that for this specific topic, it's important for men to see other men practicing it, talking about it, sharing. Because if we don't see it, if we just hear it in theory, it doesn't quite work for us men.
So Harry's came in and actually sponsored the first season of
Yeah,
Men.
so we made it.
Right.
Got scary for a second. It got hairy, pun intended. And then we found a sponsor for the first 4 episodes, and now we're planning on making a bunch more, and going to go out and do the road show and find more sponsors.
So in terms of sort of creating content and pushing out content and trying to push out this disruptive, inspirational content that's actually good for the world, as opposed to just feeding people what an algorithm says is going to get more viewers. What is the role of like brands in that, right? And how do you do that in a way that doesn't dilute the value of the actual content?
That's another great question. I think brands are changing because they're realizing their audience is changing. We're consuming content very differently now. Gen Z, millennials, we don't want to watch something that is just a brand from the top. Like if I know that this is a brand trying to feed me something, I am not going to watch it. And the data is proving that. So brands are trying to get smarter. And this specific issue is something that brands are starting to realize they should get involved with. So our whole mission at Wayfarer is how can we create branded content that isn't just selling something. You know, it's like, here's an idea, and if you want your audience to remember your name, then put your name at the end of it. After they watch it and they're inspired by it and they see your name, then they're going to equate the feeling that they had with your name anyways. So you don't need to have your logo in every 30 seconds of the video or on the front. And I think it's changing, and I think that's an exciting thing, and I think it's going to continue to change, and it's going to go deeper and deeper. And there'll be, there's films and all kinds of interactive, immersive experiences that brands will sponsor, and you'll probably never see the brand name. And I think the smartest brands are going to go in that direction. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we believe that there's a market for that, and especially with this specific issue with masculinity.
But how do you keep it sort of responsible in terms of the storytelling, right? Because they have to show ROI somehow, right? If they're going to put money behind it. So how do you not sacrifice sort of the authenticity of the message and what you're saying? And how do you negotiate that? Because I imagine it's kind of a clunky process, right? Like you need to get across some message that this brand wants to get across and wants to be associated with. Yeah. But you also don't want to lose control of the messaging because you're trying to say something.
Well, that's why we shot it first. Let's be real.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I shot the whole thing first, because I knew that if I didn't and I took them an idea, it would end up very different. It's one of the other reasons why we just stopped trying to sell the show to Hollywood, because Hollywood would have had their own version of what Man Enough should be. But at the same time, I think that there's a halo effect that brands are looking for that isn't quantifiable. We have a data scientist on Man Enough, and we're marketing towards certain people exactly the way that, the company might want. But what we're giving them are views and shares of content that matters. So I'm okay providing you the metrics that you need to hit the person you want to hit in the city you want to hit. But my job is to make sure that what I'm feeding that person is good for their soul and can make a difference. So I believe with all my heart that you can have both, that they're not mutually exclusive. You can still satisfy the brand needs, let them have their return on their investment, and also do good in the world.
Yeah, I hope that that's the case.
At least I hope, and I don't know. No, you don't have to, it's okay.
They do have to clap, that's pretty awesome. No, it is, and not enough people are doing it. And so if you start doing it, and it's successful, like My Last Days was hugely successful, went viral. You ended up partnering with Soul Pancake on it, right? And now CW is sort of attaching their name to it, which is huge, because that's something that people wouldn't necessarily touch before.
Yeah, and because death is a scary thing, except we all know that it's going to happen to us one day. It's the same thing. It's like, how can you take an idea that is taboo, right? And spin it so that it's also inspiring and uplifting and joyful, which is really what we tried to do with My Last Days. And yeah, and here we are now, going into season 4, making 2 movies have stemmed from ideas that were inspired by My Last Days that I'm doing now, and I don't know. I think people are hungry for meaningful content, even if it is a little bit scary.
So My Last Days is about people with terminal illnesses, and Man Enough is about gender, and you touch on topics like Me Too, the Me Too movement, and body image, and things that are not necessarily comfortable to talk about, especially, I think, among men. How do you convey that, or how do you tell that story as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, in a way that's not exploitative, in a way that's not co-opting their stories, right?
I had a lot of practice with My Last Days because as a filmmaker, you can't go into a person's home, especially a person who's got months left to live, and just do whatever you want to do and run the show and exploit what they're dealing with, especially because the family in many cases hasn't even dealt with it themselves, and it's the person who's dying that wants their story told. And we learned right away that for Wayfarer, is that like the Emmys music that plays?
Yeah, they're playing us off in 2 minutes,
okay,
I think.
And we learned a long time ago that we have to create an environment that supports service and is loving and joyful, because we believe that the way you shoot, kind of like your grandma's cooking. Your grandma's cooking was always better than the restaurant. Why? Because she made it with love. So the way you shoot, if you're making it with pure intentions and sincerity and with love,
grandma.
Not your grandma, I'm sorry. That's what ends up on the screen, and you feel a little bit different. So we approach it with authenticity and sincerity, and I use myself. In the body image episode, I've been struggling with body image my whole life. I get paid to take my shirt off on TV, and I struggle with it, and I get nervous about it because I still feel like I'm that 13-year-old kid that didn't have muscles and didn't get the girl. That's just something that I deal with, and people look at me and they think he can't deal with that stuff. Like, he can't have insecurities, and that's just not true. So I wanted to make sure that I used myself so that other men could see themselves, so that other women could see themselves, and because at the end of the day, these are all human issues.
So in our last couple seconds, what's the vision for Wayfarer? What's the next sort of frontier, and how can the people in this room help? What can we as consumers do?
The vision for Wayfarer is, we're building a digital media content studio that celebrates and elevates the human experience and creates disruptive inspiration. And we want to tackle all these kinds of issues. And working on the first conference for men to redefining masculinity and becoming
Amazing.
allies, and
In-person conference.
and in-person content, because we also believe in experiential media and changing hearts that way. And we're just really excited because I think that I think it's very clear that we're ready for things that make us think and feel, inspire, and take action. And so that's what we're building now, and can hopefully also hire a lot of women, so it's not just men in my office. So
That's amazing. Well, I think we're wrapping up, so I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing, because it's hugely important, and it gives me hope. And I feel like you are actively doing things to shift the paradigm and how we view empathy and compassion. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
We have to say our thing. We have to say,
oh, yeah.
So thank you. I am Abby Pucker. This is Justin Baldoni, and
we are NEXUS. All right.